Resume. All right. So, good evening, everyone, and happy solstice, happy midwinter. However you embrace that, we are in that window looking into the looks within time. And I'm really excited to share this time together this evening. This is our ninth episode of Voices of the Earth and Journeys of the Mystics. And we have had storytelling from ancient Finian tales to exploration of the Camino de Santiago, the Camino in Ireland that we've been working on. It has been a wonderful journey over the last few years. And tonight, our focus, of course, is on Green Martyrs, ecstatics, and early Irish saints, and kind of the heart of it being creating sanctuary in times of unrest. And so I always like to open up with some drawing from the world that has so inspired me. Lady Gregory, one of the amazing storytellers and purveyors of ancient Irish lore into the 19th, 20th, and 21st century. But in respect to our evening now, it takes madness to find madness. One of the things that I talked to Lissa and Maggie about when we were first putting this concept together was just like, let's follow these mad beings, these wild beings who explored the heart of coming to know the divine through the sacred landscape. And so that's what brings us here together this evening. And this picture is a picture from 1977 or 78 when Tim Severin and two of his friends decided that they were going to follow the Imram of Nav Brendan or Saint Brendan. And so we're going to find out a little bit more about what that means this evening. But I think that the most important thing that I'm hoping that I can leave everyone with this evening is a sense of wonder, intrigue, and an interest to explore. Maybe even more so that the dreaming that comes through this body temple, that perhaps something that I have stirred or that Lissa has stirred or Maggie has stirred in our tracking of the mysteries may have found a little clue that turns something on for us, and that maybe it'll turn something on for you. And I think that that might open in a few ways, but that is my hope for the evening. And just to give you a broad cover of what we're going to be looking at in a moment, I'm going to introduce Lissa and Maggie, and then take a few moments to do a deep dive into the why, like what it is that brought my dreaming and vision to this place, and why I think my wild and mad friends Lissa and Maggie were willing to join, and why perhaps some of you were willing to join us as well. And I think it's really important to define some terms just in respect to what we're talking about this evening. And then how that dovetails into the 21st century, creating sanctuary now, not just how this was important for the past, but how these various beings that we're going to connect with or learn about this evening can help feed our own exploration and own challenges and own illuminations in the 21st century. And then we're going to take a nice deep dive into ecstatics, Green Martyrs, and we're going to be in that context talking about not just from the Christian context, but we're also going to be talking about from the mythological context as well, or pre-Christian. And we will also then take a little bit of a dive into the early Irish saints and see how they're sort of an extension of that tradition. And then we should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And so again, feel free, for those of you who have come in a little bit later, if you have questions, you can either write them down and save them till the end, or you can put them into the chat, and Lissa and Maggie will be keeping their attention on those as we go. Okay, well, let's take a look, but maybe before we do so, let's meet our cast of characters. So I have had the honor of sharing the Ireland West Camino with both of these ladies, Maggie in 2024, who is joining us again in 2026, and Lissa, who walked with us, and her son in 2025, and may still be joining us for 2026. Um, and I'll just say two of my favorite people on this planet, and I am really honored to share the way with both of you. I learn a lot from both of you. I enjoy sharing fellowship with you, and I enjoy the quietness of the heart. And so um, I think that I would maybe so Lissa, I know, does a lot of counseling work and one-on-one work with people as well as with groups. She's a phenomenal storyteller. She and I have enjoyed co-hosting um, traditional storytelling nights, and it's just been really, really lovely to build a journey with you, Lissa. And Maggie, Maggie, sometimes I think you remind me of some of my dear friends who I'm pretty sure are sort of like an extension of what could be an embodiment of one of these living saints in the 21st century. I mean, you're so, what you carry is so deep and so beautiful. And the ripple effect that you have on your community around you is outstanding. Um, and so thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of Lumi in my life. It's really an honor. And so before we take off, just like to invite either Lissa or Maggie was going to just invite us into a little presencing before we jump into materia. All right, Lissa's on it. Thanks, Meg.
I'm happy to do that with the caveat that I'm staying in a hotel in Germany and it is currently 1:30 a.m. So if you hear a chorus of snores behind me, that's why. And I would just invite all of you to settle in a little bit, maybe shift the weight side to side, start to surrender a little bit of the task of holding yourself upright to gravity. Maybe roll the shoulders up, back, and down, or shake the head no or yes. And letting the breath completely fill the outline of the body on the inhale and completely empty on the exhale. And as you begin to gather in the scraps of yourself and your attention from wherever they may have been snagged today, just slowly turning that attention inward and beginning to notice, where is the center of you today? Where's the ember still glowing? And let the inhale blow on that ember. And let the exhale begin to release any of the habitual bracing or clenching or gripping that we can tend to do in our muscles and bones. And just for the space of 2 or 3 breaths, tending to that ember of what's most alive in you, softening into your own attention, welcoming every aspect of yourself here. And as I'll often say at the beginning of a story, offering yourself the invitation to listen for that very special thing, that phrase, that spark, that's your invitation into this material. And taking one more deep inhale, softening the lungs all the way full, bringing oxygen from the tips of the toes to the crown of the head. And one more full exhale, letting the breath ebb away. And when you're ready, coming on back.
Mm. Thank you, Lissa. Okay, well, let's open the door together. From that ember, deep or wide. I love this particular piece of art because it really embodies that threshold of the ancient pre-Christian traditions as well as the Christian, the aura, the halo wrapped around Anya, who also could be Saint Ita, who also could be Mother Mary, who also could be Aru, Queen of Ireland herself. locker in the background. So I just want to invite you to come in. Let's take a look and discover together. A mystery is a mystery, revealing itself in the best form that will capture the wonder in the eye of the beholder. I love this slide, this like play of light. That could be anything. Where is your heart? Where is your mind? Where are you engaged? What do you see in this image? Someone might see ghosts or fish or little angels or spirits or light refracting. Could be sperm running inside a womb. It could be anything. How does the mind engage? What do we see? And so the invitation here is that the mystery will seek to reach out to touch us across the veil in a way that will draw us out of our normal reality, yet also speak to us in a language we can understand, pictorially, symbolically. Just a couple of very brief examples from my own life. Years of doing conservation work in the highlands of Guatemala. Um, Oftentimes we would go down to Lago Atitlan or up to some of the hot springs in the mountains near the lake after we'd come way down from way up in the north and all soaking wet. And oftentimes I found these like dragon-like beings, almost like a hydra, like you see in this picture here, that were guardians of the lakes and the guardians of these hot springs and these places that we would go. And one time in 2022, when I was there last, I was in a hot spring down in this cavern with one good friend, and then this couple that were Quiche speaking, and the woman was a she was Catholic, but she was also a curandera. And she started to sing a song, and I watched the Hydra spirit of this water turn into the Mary, to the Mother Mary. And it wasn't until the next day that I wandered down into the cave, into this deep ravine again, and actually found a cave with the Mother Mary in reverence down in this place. And so my friends and we all went down and we actually cleaned the whole thing up, brought new flowers down. It was just a really sweet. And all it took was this one woman singing this song and almost like an Ikaru in the Spanish, singing this song to create a point of translation, just like we might use some sort of translation tool to translate something from English to Portuguese or from English to Irish or vice versa. There was a translation that happened there. Same thing has happened for me in a very slow fashion in Ireland. I've been living, working, traveling in Ireland extensively, spend 2 to 3 months there a year at this point, and to watch the morphing of language, to watch the morphing of understanding of mystery, of how Anya, the sovereign of Munster, how Anya, an extension of Erin herself, Eru, the queen of where Ireland gains her name from, how so easily she becomes Knockmorry. She becomes the queen of Ireland. Maggie and Lissa both walked through Knock, in the various years, and there's quite a few of you pilgrims here who have joined us this evening as well. And there is something again about the beauty of translation, about how something can be seen and how it's going to bring hope and beauty to the people that observe it, and how that brings change and how that brings beauty into their lives. And one of the things, Maggie, I remember you actually say this in the documentary about the pilgrimage, is that while you saw the beauty in this shrine, there was also an invitation, similar translation back into seeing all of the herbs that we saw along the pilgrimage. You want to talk about that for a moment before we move on?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I remember it very distinctly because a lot of the shrines and places we had come to before we got to Knock they didn't have as much fame and they didn't have as much money that had been invested into the beautification of the space. And so there was this humility and this like subtlety in older places and the places that we'd come to before, especially like some of the holy wells, like the one that we went to and cleaned some of the plant material out of, just like out in the horse paddock. And so most of the walking was in this, this palace and this space of nature and this cathedral of nature that was just so ornately adorned with medicine, with plants, with herbs and flowers that had their own gifts, like saintly gifts for us as humans. And so it was just this ecstatic experience walking and just being so surrounded by the grandeur of nature. And so I think when I came to Knock and I was confronted by the almost gaudy level of like human artistry and grandeur and the flower arrangements and everything was very epic and gorgeous, but also very neat. And there was something in me that was kind of like, oh, I don't quite like I'm bumping into the wild beauty in me is bumping into this more manicured version of it. But then there was also a blending. And so in that like reverie, I really felt the old magic and the older saints that are the plants and that are the flowers. And it was just this really kind of profound merging of human magnificence and beautification, and then just like nature been doing it for so much longer. And that mosaic is spectacular, but it's not going to cure my allergies the way that nettle would or one of the plants along the road. So I just found this like need inside me for a more wild religion, and seeing something so ornate that I'm also so familiar with, having been raised Catholic and being raised in these spaces. And then there was just this like almost reconciliation of like, oh, we've been doing the beauty medicine magic thing for so much longer, as a planet, as an ecosystem. And it was just a really nice kind of convergence for me.
Yeah, I love these translation moments where things get to cross those membranes of the nice compartmentalization that we want to do as humans, and especially in a monetized society. Like it's so easy to create these constructs. And so this is a great segue into our evening, because I think one of the most important things here, we have been tracking climate change for thousands of years. As humans, we have moved with changes. Our relationship with the divine has changed with climate change. We have picked up and moved entire nations, entire people as climate has changed. And I think that the most important thing to understand is that when we move places, when we bump into other cultures, when we absorb other languages, the world begins to shape itself in a little bit different way. So just a really high level, I don't want to blow everybody away with brainy smurf stuff right now, but this is just super high level. We're looking at within human memory over the last 10,000 years, the planet has changed so much. The North Sea was not a sea, it was Earth. People lived there. Our ancestors lived there. 10,000 years ago. We're not talking about 100,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago. 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, there was still a landmass connecting Denmark to the UK, connecting the UK to France and to Spain. 7,000 years ago, there were still massive islands in the North Sea that do not exist anymore. It's fascinating to think how that wires into our memory, and then how that would also then wire our relationship with the mysteries. Don't try to write all this down. This is just a super high level just to show. As we have tracked changes in the precession of equinoxes, we also can track changes in technology, in mythology, and how those are utilized to relate to the world around us. And so I just kind of wanted to draw that into the bucket here this evening, our little cauldron that we're sharing. But you can return to this later. There's plenty of works out there to learn about that. But this is the most important thing again. I couldn't find a really good image that shows the layering over time of temples in Ireland. Some of the really important sites, massive sites that might be very well known, such as Newgrange, Loch Crew, Carrickeel, Carramore. But I think this image of the layering of Mayan temples on the far right in here really sets a great standard for if we look at when something first is being created, oftentimes it was because there was a spring or a grove of gorgeous trees or a cave. And then something gets built over it because somebody's like, hey, some great things have been happening here. I'm going to donate a bunch of money. Let's build it into this thing. And then eventually the ideas build upon the ideas. Religion builds upon religion. Cycles are of relating, ways that we can relate in consciousness, morph and change, evolve. And so eventually 8 or 9 generations later, you end up with these huge temple complexes that we think of as the sacred Mayan sites. However, some of the most sacred Mayan sites that I know in the highlands of Guatemala and Mexico are still just springs, groves, trees, caves. So I'm going to start to pivot us into essence. I think this is one really important moment that I shared with Lissa while we were walking the pilgrimage this year. We're walking along a canal for an entire day from Longford through the headwaters and the boglands into the Shannon River. And all of a sudden I realized that if I flip myself upside down, that there was another aspect of myself riding on a horse, walking parallel to me along this way. And it was just this moment of beauty. I was just like, here I am in the 21st century looking at an aspect of myself, perhaps in the Celtic otherworld, perhaps in the Summerlands, perhaps somewhere else in time, perhaps it was just my imagination. But the invitation was, I get to look deep into this place where time folds. And so, invitation with Ireland and our mysteries is that there's 5 sacred roads and 3 rivers. There's, of course, the 5 original sacred walking paths. There's the Shli Ashel, which is the same as the Ireland West Camino, which we've been walking in Ireland for the last few years. And then there's the other ones as well. I'm currently working with the OSI office in Ireland on the Shli Dala, which goes down from the hill of Tara down to the Dingle Peninsula. But the 5 sacred roads, and I think the other thing, again, to set the context, 3 rivers, 3 layers of the cake. We've got the ancient megalithic, Neolithic culture. Then we have the early Iron Age Celtic culture. And then, of course, then we have the later Iron Age, which is the heart of, the Christian era as well. So these are the 3 rivers that are moving on these 5 roads or around. But then, of course, the heart of it is the simpler, the better. The green diamond, the sanctuary, the heartland of Ireland itself. So let's take another dive. When we open up the mystery from beyond the primordial, it opens us to this opportunity to connect with the mythological, to connect with the beings who ward the various provinces or ancient kingdoms of Ireland, from the Morrigu in the northwest to Bridget in the southeast and Leinster, to Anya in the southwest in Munster, to Macha up in the northeast in Ulster. And then, of course, we've got Nuara in the north, and we also have Manana MacLair in the west, and Lugh in the northwest, and the Dagda in the east, holding down their story, and Eru, who ties it all together. But now again, let's take it through the translation. Let's take it through the Corandera, singing the song, turning the Hydra into Mary. Let's do the same thing with these ancient goddesses. And we've got Saint Bridget in Leinster. We've got Saint Brendan in Munster. We've got Colmcille in Ulster. We've got Saint East Ita in Munster. We've got Saint Attracta in Connacht. We've got Saint Enda in Connacht. And we have Saint Kevin or Saint Kevin in Leinster, and Saint Verona or Baroni in Ulster. And of course, Mother Mary or Knockmary, or the Queen of Ireland. So we're going to do a dive now a little bit more into these, but first, I just want to define some terms here a little bit. And in order to get there, I think this is a derivative of what we've already been talking about, is electricity is electricity. What you plug into it is going to be powered by it. I mean, if there's a heart on it, of course, it's powered with love. But the beauty of it being that whatever tool you plug into that electricity can be utilized for whatever work that it is that you intend to use it for. The divine current, similar to electricity, is present. What do we do with it? How is that wielded, both as power or as illumination, as guidance to restoring the ancient harmonies, the timeless harmonies that I believe we are being constantly asked to be in service to? At least I can speak to that for myself. So let's open the old book and define some terms here. I think the most important thing, differentiating the difference between a green martyr and other types of martyrs. There's also red martyrs, which are what most people are more typically used to hearing about. Those are the ones who've been slain or died for their beliefs. And then, of course, you've got white martyrs who are complete renunciates. Most white martyrs that I can really connect with tend to be in more of, you see them in Asia, in the Southeast, a lot of the Hindu traditions, the renunciates, the sadhus that let the world go. But I think, in terms of our focus here this evening and what we're going to open together, the Green Martyrs really represent, I think the main thing, the green really should stand out, is that there's a hunger for the deep nature immersion. The nature is seen as a door to access the divine. But also nature is seen as a way to sort of insulate the self from the distractions of the world. So that's where the renunciation and austerities come in here. I think the other thing that's really important to note, especially, the Green Martyrs were sort of an extension of what were originally known as the Desert Fathers, albeit the Desert Fathers and Mothers, those that gave up the world and went out and sought the hermits' den in the deserts in Canaan, or in what's now Israel or Lebanon, Jordan, etc. And I think that what happened was then a lot of people sought to, very, very much as many people in our culture do, seek sort of to leave behind and to find that place where we can be in sanctuary again. I mean, that's essentially what the whole the colonization of the United States really was, at least fueled by that intention, people seeking that sense of freedom. So here we've got Saint Brendan on his Imram, his great voyage where he sailed all over the North Sea and the Atlantic and possibly to North America. And he finds this white martyr who has given himself over to the ice and snow. So one word on here that's in the Irish that'll come up in our conversation throughout the evening is the Imram, or Imrama. Imrama is the Irish word for to give yourself over to the divine. And oftentimes that looked like literally people would put themselves in a boat with water and just put their hands across their chests and just float down the river or on the sea until the boat would come into contact with land. And if there wasn't someone there, then they would choose that as their place of ascension, that place to do the deep nature immersion. Ecstatics. Ecstatics, I think, were probably some of the most influential in my late teens all the way into my late 30s in terms of reaching the divine through ecstasy, through chanting, through suspending the world, tucking time away. I get to find that sense of the ecstatic relationship with the divine when I'm walking pilgrimage, which is why I keep going back and will keep going back. I get to the quietness where there's no thought. Just get to be. Seeking union with the divine through ecstatic expression, which ecstatic expression can be reached through joy and illumination. It also can be reached through grief and through release and through pain. They are both gateways. And I think Lissa, I wanted to invite you to kind of share a little bit about that because I know that's a really important part for you for your work in the sense of bridging both above and below.
Yeah, I think you and I have shared a practice of saying the Hail Mary in Irish.
Hmm.
And in that very small prayer, there is an invocation of the life of the womb and also an invocation of death. And this, I think of Mary, I think of many of these ecstatic saints in that way, that they're guardians of the life, death, life portal. And death isn't the end, it's right in the middle. And we can transform all of those experiences of descent and downfall through the attention and the mindful presencing that we are able to um, offer in those experiences rather than trying to avoid or hide from them. And when I think about the really storied mystics like Hildegard von Bingen, like Rumi, they were people who had trained an extraordinary amount in the laws and the practices and the scholarship of their time. And so these ecstasies were grounded deeply in a way that, when we're talking about the divine coming through and being, in a sense, stained by whatever it filters through. So for an 18th century farmer, it looks like the Virgin Mary. For someone earlier, it might look like the god Lu. We don't know. It's still just the divine. And so I think when I think about these ecstatics who were rooted in these deep traditions of scholarship, they could pull down this energy in a way that people horizontally could understand, where most of us, I think, really struggle to understand grace to that extent. Um, and then because they're pulling down so much joy and so much ecstasy, we can then hear from them or understand from them that it could be just as powerful to sit with the grief, to sit with the death, to sit with the sorrow. And when you first talked about this subject, I got very curious about the ways in which interrupting our human appetites around comfort, around sleep, around food, around warmth or coldness could help us grow a little more familiar with the ecstasy of descent. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but those are some
Yeah,
of my
that's
thoughts about
great.
it.
Yeah, we just installed our cold plunge next to the sauna at the house. And so I've been doing that almost every evening, like going from the sweat to the cold plunge and just like the shock of getting in, but it's just like, just be with it. And then just the way that the chi moves through my body and the illuminations that come, just gorgeous. And I think that's the thing that before I move slides here, I really want to call out is that often it's with the ecstatics, it's vision. And a lot of times it might take a while before that vision really lands. And as Lissa said, sort of distributes laterally where people can pick it up and lift it. And then sometimes it's just like that. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about how certain visions move through specific saints this evening. Now we're going to pivot because now we're moving into the early Irish saints. And I think, one of the things to really caveat here is that all of the early Irish saints were pre-Council of Nicaea. And so there was really a lot of different churches. You had Gnostic church communities, but in the north, in the Green Isles, it's often referred to as the Celtic Church or the Ionian Church, and it was very different than the Roman Church in that women could be abbots or abbesses. A priest, an abbot, they could still marry. And so you'll hear this evening about how some of the early Irish saints also were mothers. Oftentimes more mothers than fathers, but and that I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I think the other thing that is really important about the early Irish saints is understanding the divinity within nature still. So there's this element of Gnosticism in relation to place, relationship to nature, but also uh, I'll pose that there's almost like an animism element of relating to the divine, relating to God through nature. And a big part of that is, as I've got noted here, is the translation. It's the bridging of traditions. It's the bridging of the language that is being spoken, the mysteries, the things that get people really excited. The reason why the Christian renunciates did so well in Ireland was because they fit right in with the old Celtic stories, which was these mad people that do crazy things, living on the side of a cliff, eating seaweed, bird eggs, and fish eggs for 20 years, getting skinny as a rail, and all this beauty is moving through them. And so they fit perfectly into the story. One of the few places in the world where Christianity was not taken by force with a sword. It was just naturally evolved pretty rapidly over a few centuries. So let's go ahead and jump in a little bit. Oh yes, I did want to pause here and just as a reminder how this ties in with the 21st century, and we'll get into a little bit of that with each of the beings that we're going to connect with here, but why it's important not only for the veneration or the exoneration of these beings, both the Christian beings as well as the mythological beings, is because they provide this gorgeous doorway. They remind us of who we can be at our best. Just like films do for us now, or a good book, these characters that come alive and inspire us to do something that is greater than, to excel. But there's also this element of intercession, of inviting some aspect of something that we exonerate, look to our heroes, our saints, our holy people, that they do something that we look up to, and they're living by example and inviting us to do the same thing. Then, of course, they also offer us an ally in a time of adversity when it feels like the world is too much, or it feels like the challenge is too great. We're pushing against so much. But then the opposite side of that, it's not just what we can receive, but what we give back. And I think that's one of the things that's most important, is that there's an opportunity here to, through gratitude, to give back to that which is greater than self, to give back to the divine. So again, invitation as we dive into all these characters, as we move into this last phase of our sharing here, is that perhaps one of these characters may be someone that you know nothing about, or maybe know a little bit about, and that some little seed or some little kernel might turn on for you that will open a door, that will open a block, that will help you to see beyond the container of the nice compartmentalization of things that we do here in the West, and to remember a part of our sacred heritage, of our blood heritage, that is in reference to outside of the container, the interweaving of divinity and nature and humanity as one. So let's open the flower first with the ecstatics. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here because a lot of these beings are going to intertwine. They're going to be a little bit in all the places. But I think first and foremost, just to kind of set a bar, these are three of probably what, in my mind, are probably three of the most well-known ecstatics in our Western culture. While they might not all be Western, of course, Rumi was from the Middle East. Sri Mahanandamayi was from India. They have, over the last century or so, become such a strong part of our culture. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, of course, was from Germany, so very much Western European culture. But all of these beings, massive ecstatic states, touching the divine, bringing that lateral current down, allowing it to spread in whatever fashion, through poetry, through expression of love, through speaking of tongues, through the gorgeous music that we just heard a hint of Hildegard von Bingen. So let's now use that translation tool and bring that over into Ireland. And I'm going to lean into Lissa here a little bit to speak in a little bit. But she and I were rapping on, what are some of the most interesting sort of ecstatics that we can think of in pre-Christian Ireland. And we came up with quite a few, but these are three of, I think, what kind of came out as the cream on the top. Buona Sweeney, or Mad Sweeney, Mish or Mish, and Cuchulainn. And I think I'm going to pause because I've been sharing quite a bit. And Lissa, do you want to just give us a little like popcorn of the three of these? Or I know you don't know Mad Sweeney quite as well, so I can come back on that one.
Sure, I'm just laughing here because there's that old joke about Ireland. It's the country where the songs about war are happy and the songs about love are sad. And I'm just noticing that all of these ecstatics are ecstatics of descent, right? Cuchulainn goes into the warp, the ecstasy of warp in the battle frenzy. And Mish transformed into a beast, an animal, shapeshifted with feathers and fur out of grief, out of pure grief for the loss of her father. And Sweeney Geld became mad after perpetrating a crime that drove him crazy, and the lack of forgiveness that he received from his culture that sent him out to the edges. So all of them are, in a sense, denizens of the edges, denizens of the descent, and yet have so much to tell us about navigating those times out of time when we're dealing with something that is completely overwhelming to the human psyche, how you can draw on the more than human world, the animal world, the world of nature, like Maggie was talking about, to find the power to withstand it. If that makes sense to everyone. The story I'm most familiar with here is Mish. So I can say I'm fast. I didn't know this before I was studying a little bit for this podcast, that the place where Patrick served out his time of enslavement was in Slieve Mish. So Slieve Mish is the mountains where Mish apocryphally went mad after her father was beheaded by the Fianna and Finn McCool. And in those days, it was still traditional to lick the body of someone that you loved as a way of trying to heal them, trying to call them back. And the story goes that Mish, having found her father dead on the battlefield, licked her father's body to try to bring him back, and receiving instead a mouthful of his blood, instantly sprouted feathers and claws and flew off to the mountains. She didn't want to be a human being anymore. And there she lived for 300 years. Some say simply grieving, some say terrorizing the human population below the mountains. And various kings would send warriors to try to slay her, and that never worked out very well. But finally, they sent a harper, and he laid out a cloth of silk, and he arranged his harp and a pile of gold and some delicious food. And then he took off all of his clothes and he began to play music. And slowly, slowly, he coaxed her in from the edges, and he bathed her and he washed the dirt away, and he soothed her and he fed her, and he made love to her and he sang to her. And slowly her feathers and fur fell off, and she re-entered the human story. So I think there's something there about why we go into the wild and what can bring us back. Do you want to speak a little more to Sweeney Girls?
Well, I want to, with I'm just briefly with Cahulan, like one of the things that years ago when I was first doing like large stage presentations and things like that, whether it was in the scientific community or the spiritual community, like Qigong is great, but like to do Qigong while doing sort of this like haka haka Maori and you just like just getting all the energy out was always the best way to just really loosen up my tongue and get me to be really present. And so that's where like that warp spasm, the torquing, the twisting, the untwisting of what is bound within the body becomes something, it's an invitation. We can all unwind ourselves, prepare ourselves for what is next. With Lorna Sweeney, I think the thing that I love about him is how he just was so uninterested in coming into contact with any of humanity that in the tale that I've got an old early 18th century version of his story, which you should borrow sometime, Lisa, because it's got the Irish on the left, English on the right. It's got all the original verse. And basically, he just like spent his whole time climbing up trees. Like they'd send all the beautiful women to try to get him to come down. They'd send his wife that he left behind to try to get him to come down. And he just whoop, up into another tree and just sit up there. I'm not coming down. So just, it's like that sense of there may be a fear element there, but he's turned his austerity into a power that is keeping him illuminated and above the world. He's seeking that ecstatic union with the mystery to stay away from that which is human. So why don't we go ahead and jump just again, this will be very high level. 3, the ecstatics in the early Christian Ireland, Saint Aidan, who apparently could wind up his energy and channel the movement of the winds, and would reach these extremely ecstatic states where he would sing. He was also a tree shepherd, which is one of the reasons why I put the trees blowing in the wind there. Saint Brede of Kildare, she had this magical cloak that she rolled out, and it just kept rolling out, and she was able to claim thousands of acres for her abbey with that. Saint Fursha is a little bit one that's much less known, but his impact on later Christian iconography is massive because he had these mad ecstatic states where he would see the play of heaven and hell, like, all within each other, moving through his heart, like up and down and up and down. And the demonic aspects of hell and the glorious angelic aspects of heaven that he saw ended up influencing the art for the next 1,000 years after him, and really has set our understanding of what, in the terms of Abrahamic traditions, see heaven and hell as looking like. So while he's very not well known, his visions rule this world. Now, Green Martyrs. Okay, so let's jump in here. We've got the Skellig Michael, which is, of course, where a bunch of the Green Martyrs spent their time. So pre-Christian martyrs: Fintan, Etain, Finn McCool. Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you for a moment just to play.
I'm noticing too the way that in all of these traditions, there's a relationship between what is timeless, what is eternal, and what is time bound. And the way that these archetypes are dancing in what is eternal and finding a way to weave it in and out of the time bound. I think of the story of Attain, which is, I think, actually a tragedy. Is she's incarnated in so many different forms. She shaped it into so many different forms, and the same with Fintan. Um, and it's actually hard in these old stories to find a through line of what is the self. And I wonder if maybe that's something that Christianity brought to the party is some awareness of self and the through line of self, this relationship to the Anamkara, the relationship to the divine, where in animism we are completely subsumed by it, we become it, and that has so much to offer. There's almost this Venn overlap in the early Christianity where that still exists, but we're also in relationship to it. So that's just something I'm noticing right now.
Yeah, and I think maybe something that's important to play with there is, prior to Christianization, all of our ancestors in the West and the north of Ireland all believed in reincarnation. When we passed, we went over to the Summerlands. We went back to Tir na Nog, the land beneath the waves, wherever it was that our soul was called home. We took a break and then we came back because, well, the world was gorgeous. And why would you leave? And there's something that your soul, there's a work that you have to do here that continuously needs to be reiterated again and again. So I believe, it's like with Fintan, there's this element of eternal change, of transitioning, shifting, moving with the times, arising as these different, as the salmon, or arising as the swan, whatever being it was necessary for him to embody in that next go.
Yeah, just fearless participation in all of it. I get
Yeah.
this sense in all of these stories. There is, like you were saying, no fear of death. It is full throttle,
Yes.
whatever life is offering, because yeah, we're just going to dip in and come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go take a break in the Summerland for 300 years or 3 minutes or both.
Mhm.
Come on back. All right. So similarly with some of the early Green Martyrs, these guys all about vision. And that's, I think, something that I feel is really important for us as individuals in the 21st century. Like, most of us have visions. Do you have the gumption to follow it? Saint Govna in the center, she had this dream that she was supposed to wander across Ireland until she came upon 9 stags. She did it. And she created this amazing abbey, which eventually became a convent when they separated men and women. But it's just like, she did it. Saint Kevin, or Saint Kevin, he similarly followed this concept, this dream, out into the forest, and then was told to stand with his arms out so that he could receive the grace and the light of heaven. And he stood there for so long that a blackbird built their nest on his arm. Another bird, a robin, built their nest in his hair. Just, these guys are amazing. I mean, I just love it. St. Kiernan followed a fox until it brought him to his place of ascension. I was mentioning earlier, like most of these beings, they're imram, they're giving themselves over. Their journey was often on a boat. But St. Kieran just followed a fox. He's just like, hey, there it is. I'm going that way until he found the place where he built one of the most well-known abbeys and monasteries in Europe today, Clonmacnoise. So I wanted to save the heart of our time here to talk a little bit more about the early Irish saints. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to bring up basically like a card for each one of the saints, and then Lissa, Maggie, and I will riff on it depending on where we're coming in. And so it's going to provide a little example of the importance of this being in helping us with this transliteration of mysteries, but also how they can be helpful in the sense of in our personal and our daily lives. So personalizing it very more. Keep in mind, while I was also raised Catholic, I was also trained by Jesuits, which is very focused on the humanitarian relationship with the divine, and truly respect that upbringing. So bringing us back here, we already kind of took a look at the slide and where are these various beings that are sort of transliterations of these ancient divine beings who in the 5th and mostly 6th century, but also into the early 7th, played a major role in the evolution of consciousness and the relating connectivity of humanity with nature and with the divine. So we're going to open up with Mother Mary. And so on each of these slides, I'm going to give you the Irish, so it's not Navmori. And she, of course, is the mother of Christ. But the way she plays into Irish mythology and iconography is so gorgeous, because she, in a sense, becomes an extension of the Divine Mother of Ireland herself. So at Knockmorey, which is in County Mayo, she is known as the Ard Ri, or Ard Ri More, which Ard means high, Ri means king or queen, More means Mary. So she's the queen, and so she's the queen of Ireland. And so Maggie was speaking earlier to the apparition that was seen in Knock that was in 1879. I think it was like 16 or 18 people all saw the same apparition, and it lasted for hours. And where the apparition was seen on the west wall of the parish there, they've created this beautiful, gorgeous, slightly ostentatious, but it is still fairly simple compared to some of the uh, churches in Spain or Portugal. It's amazing what you can do with empirical money brought in from South America and Central America involuntarily. So it's beautiful to see what they've been able to create in Ireland just from within a non-empirical nation. So of course, Mary, bringing hope, comfort, in kind of a braid of translation of words, a return to the summerlands, like a return to innocence. And I think that's one of the things that I feel is most important about the Mother Mary, is that she's an invitation for everyone to find their way back in. She creates that sacred hoop with the rosary. She creates the sacred hoop with her heart, with her womb, that invites all of us, no matter what we've done in this world, to return to the garden, return to innocence. And Maggie, I know you have a really strong connection with her too. So I just would love to invite you to speak in your heart here for a moment before we move, if you will. Oh, and I did carry that Our Lady Guadalupe banner all the way to top of Crow Patrick this year.
I know you did, and I'm so grateful for that. I really am. Yeah, I think it's hard to begin because I don't want to just lead us all into a really, really long ramble. But I was thinking about this when you were sharing about the visions of heaven and hell, and I feel kind of compelled to share as from the perspective of an ecstatic, an experience that happened 2 nights in a row in a ceremony for me. And on the first night, I had what would be considered, I think, like a really, really bad trip, wherein I was in hell, and I actually wasn't familiar. I'm not very studied in myths and legends, so I wasn't familiar with the Inanna story. But in this experience, it was very, very physical and literal, kind of hallucination, apparition of my own, in my own personal, subjective way of perceiving reality. And I was hung on a meat hook, and I was being devoured by these, like, hideous, horrible rat creatures. And I remember looking at them, and they were looking at me. And as they were looking at me, their faces were changing, and they were just getting uglier and uglier and uglier. And instead of panicking, I had this moment of grace in that experience. And I just looked at them, and with so much love, I was like, you are incredibly ugly. Like, as if it was a compliment. Like, I was just so impressed by their artistry in their appearance and in the horror of it. I was kind of just like taken by it. And in that experience, was like I was able to kind of break the bad trip, and I came out of it. And the following night, I had a similar experience, but this time I was experiencing Mother Mary, and she was before me. And it wasn't the first time that I've had a really strong, intimate apparition with her. And she was before me, and instead of, like, immediately what happens is I bow. Like, it's just an automatic thing. Like, I can't look at her, just the reverence takes over. So I bowed, and in that moment, she came into me, and then she was me. And there was this sense of like, unworthiness, and like, oh, no, no, no. And then she was like, well, you were willing to be so intimate with and so associating yourself with these rat demons, because that was how I was able to accept the hell experience. So I was just like, yeah, you and I, we got this together. We are this together. So it was this like flip side of her being like, oh, you're willing to be that, but you're not willing to be this. And so I had to accept the divinity in me as well as the demonic energy. And so there was this, real kind of intimate experience of like heaven and hell both within me. And ever since that experience, I was raised Catholic, and the conditioning of that is twofold in the way that my mind processes mystical things. And it goes one way and says, oh, I'm not worthy, I must be delusional. Or it goes the other way and goes, oh, I'm so special, I must be a saint. And so it's one or the other. And I think the longer I walk my own personal path of intimacy with both the demonic and the divine is this, and this supernatural in general, let's say, it's this acceptance of how like normal it is. Even if it's not commonplace, it's actually normal to have these experiences, and her presence in that immaculate mercy and that total compassion and that like huge, huge, huge love and beauty that Mother Mary embodies, like that being inside of me and being actually an aspect of my true self. That's been the process of like allowing myself into that hoop, like allowing myself into that experience. And so that's, I think, one of the things that she's given me is access to not only my own divinity, but to my own darkness as well. And just this like deep, deep, deep acceptance of all of it. And like the way that a mother, I'm not a mother myself, but the way that I know a mother and the mother archetype within me accepts the behavior and the expression of the child, knowing the purity of that being and knowing the like deep inherent goodness of that being. And so, the mother has this infinite amount of compassion and grace. And I think that has just been my own experience of like, how do I, go past the ideas I've been told about who this person is and actually experience her inside myself so that I can be, in that intimate connection, and actually normalize it as like not being delusional and crazy, and also not being special, and actually having that be like, she's a living reality and we see it everywhere. So that's just my own experience of the Mother Mary. And it just really came up strong. That memory came up strong. I haven't thought about it in a while. When you were talking about the heaven and hell visions, I'm like, oh yeah, like totally.
Yeah. I think to me, the thing that you talked about the sacred hoop, I've talked about the sacred hoop. The the beauty that is offered through the veneration of Mary, through a relationship. It's like calling that light in to find that balanced place again, but more than anything, realizing that there isn't just this like one secret gate guarded by Peter with his cane, his keys and chains, but there's, if we remember our original innocence, we never left the garden. And that's what she invites us back into. That's what she invites us back into.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in that in all-encompassing mercy for the other, we're able to kind of come into the reflection, like being able to reflect that outward and being able to be her, actually be her in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, let's jump into our next one, Ireland's patron saint, now Patrick or Saint Patrick. Of course, this one I think is really important, in sense of how someone can take personal enslavement, which is what Lissa spoke to earlier. He was enslaved in Ireland. He's originally of mixed Brittonic and Roman stock in England, somewhere on the coast. He was abducted and became a slave. And then later he felt the calling to return. And I think that probably that's the most important thing to keep in mind here about St. Patrick. There's always this sort of idea of like, oh, he cast out the serpents, or he cast out the druids, or he cast out the things. There is some element to that. And I think Liz and I were talking about this on the pilgrimage, where it's just like, anytime you have an established order of something, there's a lot of garbage. I mean, who knows who was sleeping with who and who was buying whose, indulgences, and who was, like, it happens in every system that becomes monetized. It's just what happens. And so what he was bringing was this illumination of this whole new ecstatic experience of having a personal relationship with the divine. And what a phenomenal wave to ride. I mean, he's basically surfing in the first quarter of the Piscean age, of like the rolling into the currents of water that we were a part of in the last 2,000 years, but really doing this number of trying to weave the stories of the ancient Celts in a Christian context as well. I mean, there's of course the Oisin, the Finn McCool's son, who had disappeared into the Summerlands for 300 years, not because he was taking a break, but because he had this gorgeous, gorgeous fairy queen that he had to go run off and take care of business with for 300 years. But when he came back, all the Finians were gone, and all the humans had become very diminutive. And so his story of a lot of what is believed to be a lot of the ancient Finian tales were supposedly drawn from the conversations between Patrick and Oisin. I think that probably the most important thing that we can nurture out of a connectivity with St. Patrick, more than anything, is devotion. Devotion to following a dream. All these other things are important there, but devotion to following a dream, getting a vision, receiving the marching orders from the divine, and doing the thing, doing it, and not wobbling and, oh, maybe that isn't what I was supposed to do. I go through that when I'm thinking about this pilgrimage that I'm working on in Ireland. Like, it's a lot of energy and time. And I need to do my other work that actually pays for how we eat and how we do our things. But it's like, it's not really that interesting. Like, this pilgrimage, it's like I'm all in. And then sometimes I wobble. And so, Patrick is sort of like that light, the fire on top of the hill of Slane, that reminds me that to set the fire, to do the work, to follow through with something. I'm going to go ahead and jump to our next, because we are running low on time. Saint Attracta, very much not a very well-known saint from Connacht, from up in the northwest of Ireland, where my mother's people come from. Sligo, Mayo, Galway, where all three of those counties kind of come together. They are noble renunciate, but she's most known for her creation of hospices to support pilgrims walking this ancient pilgrimage route that we've been walking. Now, for those of you who have walked it already, you probably remember, or maybe you don't remember, walking through what is her parish. because there's almost nothing there except for a cemetery and a lot of ruins, which of course has to do with political economic changes 400 years ago, which is why this pilgrimage route is just being reintroduced now. But I think one of the things that she provides sanctuary for those who are being pursued. The story of her parting of Lochgara, which means the neighbor lakes. She created this isthmus in which people that were fleeing from marauders could make it into a sanctuary, very similar to when Moses parted the Red Sea, and then she brought the waters back together to remove them. So drawing on Saint Attracta in these times, I think to me it's that really the essence of pilgrimage, holy water, going to the holy wells in veneration, like many like Maggie, like when we were all singing at Saint Attracta's well, Tobarno Attracta last year, like it was so gorgeous, and just all the beauty of feeling that, but taking care of those in need. So I think that's a good reminder in the 21st century, where things have become very much about the individual and about how self-glorification and self-promotion on social media and all the things, turning back and remembering that we are also the ones that are hungry. We are also the ones that are in bereavement, that are walking on pilgrimage, that we are here to help uplift others as well. And I'm going to be very brief on him because this is basically, I hate to say it like this, but he's basically like the Irish Saint Ignatius. He created sort of what became more of the disciplined monastic life in Ireland. Also, he was sort of like the school through which many of the other saints moved. He was based out on the Aran Islands. Amazing being. I feel like I lean into him for the mind. I lean into him when it's time to strengthen how, well, let's just put it simply, how the synapses are firing and where I'm engaging them, and then what I'm feeding, what I'm giving back. So what am I doing with my time? Am I reading and learning something, or am I watching the Viking series over and over again? You know, like there are two different choices of directions of energy, time, and what is a good balance, of course, but like teasing out, like if I continue to read these ancient stories, the pre-Christian stories, the mythological tales, read these wild stories about these early Irish saints, and then have something more beautiful to share and engage with, like I'm learning, we get to learn together, we're promulgating knowledge. And so St. Enda really bringing in that. So let's switch over to Leinster and to St. Breda or St. Brede or St. Bride, which of course is where the word bride comes from, is from St. Bridget. It's when it came from the knights, when they exonerated their wives to be, they became their bride, they became their Bridget, they became their inspiration, they became their hearth keeper, they became their warm womb place. I I think I'm going to pause here because I wanted to allow Lissa to share a little bit. And so Lissa, with a lot of these saints, they all have connections with plants, with animals. I just want to invite you to share a little bit about, you know, whether it's just St. Bridget or a few of these that we've touched into so far. And I do want to put a caveat in. We are 1 minute from 8:45. So if anybody needs to leave straight away, you know, feel free to just duck out quietly. But since we're in it, we're going to just keep rolling. But I just want to honor people's time. If you got to go, thank you for coming. But listen, over to you.
Well, one of my favorite Breed stories is that there was a king who had sentenced a man to death because he had unwittingly killed his pet fox. The fox was eating the man's chickens. The farmer killed the fox and didn't know that it was the king's pet fox that had escaped. And when Breed found this out, she went into the woods and she called a wild fox to her, and it nestled under her cloak, and she brought it to the king. And she showed the king that what he actually wanted was restoration of love, not death. And so in building relationship with this new fox, she was able to save the man's life and also bring a little bit of love back into the equation. And I so appreciate that story because I think in so many of these stories of the early saints, the becoming of animals, the way it is with Fintan and Tuin and Mish and Svinigel, changes to relationship with the animal. And when you're in relationship with a thing, you can love it. And so I really appreciate the way that like even Kieran, I think it was a wild boar, a wild boar that he spoke to gently, and the wild boar became his first brother monk in his cell. And he just spoke sweetly to all of the animals, and the animals were his first brother monks. And so there's this sense of being able not just to belong to the world, but also to relate to it, that I think the animals symbolize in the relationships with the animals. I don't want to talk too long because I know we're at time, but that was the first thing that sprang to mind.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think in respect to Bridget, I mean the relationship with Bridget has become so strong that the Brigidine sisters in Kildare relit her eternal flame, which had been burning eternally for thousands of years, and then was put out sometime post Cromwell era and was relit back in the 1990s. They are rowdy bunch of nuns, and they're so amazing, so eclectic. I love them. If you ever get to go to Kildare, certainly go to the Solus Breach Center. They do have hermitages there where you can do sleeps and stays. They keep the eternal flame burning there. I've got a group of people that we're going to go there this coming spring. So I'm really excited for that. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and move so that we can touch a few of these other folks. Saint Kevin. I hate to say it, but every time I hear Saint Kevin, I see the little minion Kevin from the cartoon, and it's really hard not to go there. But what's really easy to supplant that is Saint Kevin is probably, I hate to do a total transliteration, but he is Saint Francis of Ireland. I mean, again, he had the blackbird that nested in his arm. He had birds that nested in his hair and his beard. Like the he was the protector of all the wild and noble things. Similarly, a boar story. There were some Leinstermen hunting a boar, and they chased, and the boar came into his cell and huddled behind St. Kevin. And he basically told the hunters, like, sorry, he's one of my brothers in disguise. So just, again, that personal relationship with the beings of the forest and beings of the wild. Of course, the site that is most associated with him is Glendalough, which is in County Wicklow. I don't know why it says Kildare up there. Oh, that's a rollover from St. Ita. I apologize for that. He is in Wicklow. Glendalough is certainly not in County Limerick. So just let's see if, nope, I did it on that one too. Oh, well, sorry. But again, just to think that I think probably the quality for St. Kevin that is probably most important is when we lean into Vision Quest, when we go out on our own, when we go take the time, cut away from the world, set ourselves in a place where we can listen, play, pray, contemplate, meditate, let the world go. I love this element too of resisting glamour. Like he was one, like he came from a very wealthy warrior class. And like many of these saints, which is probably why we know of them, because it's so they renounced, for people that renounce things that they don't have, they don't quite get heard of quite as much. But the beauty of it is that the resistance to glamour, the resistance to the way something looks. And I think we get a lot of that now on social media. You get all these people that are projecting all of this stuff. Are they really carrying it? I don't know. No, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Resisting the glamour spell. Ooh, are you ready for it? All right, so let's go ahead and jump out to Munster. No, Ita or Saint Ita. I think she might be one of my favorites. She's oftentimes called the Saint Bridget of Munster, so the southwest of Ireland, but she's most known as the foster mother of Irish saints. And in that, because many of the saints that we've been talking about here at some point actually were housed or lived at her abbey where she trained them. But her thing was she was supposedly so gorgeous, like very, very beautiful. But she had such a thirst for the ecstatic state and for holiness, she rejected the world, rejected a forced marriage, and gave herself over to the divine and to creating this abbey. And I think the thing that stands out most about her is that when external beauty, not glamour, when external beauty becomes an extension of an internal beauty, then it becomes a magnetism for the divine, for something to become larger than life and to uplift others. She also was one that had a really strong vision. So I say that in the down at the bottom, following the three lights, she was told to follow these lights, and that after she saw the third light, she would be shown where her place of ascension was, or where her abbey would be created, which is just northeast of Limerick. And I'll be walking there next year. um, so so I think I already kind of lean into these things. I think another thing that she's really known for, and I think it's important, and partly Maggie, with what you were talking about before, is like she's known to be one to call on to perform exorcism, to remove the darkness from something, to remove the demonic and bring the angelic back in, to like bathe, to cleanse, to renew. So she's almost like the red carpet for Mother Mary, if you will. It's just like to prepare the way, to cleanse. She is the medicine to help us prepare ourselves to get closer. Now, Saint Brendan. Saint Brendan is probably my favorite and probably the one that I call upon the most. I've probably said a few of them are my favorite, but that's just how I am with these things. I get really excited about them. Saint Brendan, his vision, he would climb the mountains and he would be on top of what is now known as Knockbrendan, on the Dingle Peninsula and other places. He'd go up in these mountains and he'd have these massive visions, and he'd see these lands and these islands and these spirit beings and these angelic beings. And then he'd come down the mountain and he'd be like, "Hey guys, I got an idea. Let's all get in a boat made out of ash sticks that we'll weave together with willow, and then we'll put some cow skins on it, and maybe put one or two sails on it. We're going to just go out there to past the end of the world, and we're going to go to these Isles of Wonder, these Isles of the Blessed. We're going to go see these ancient revered beings in this beautiful Imram, one of the best Imram tales that there are in the Irish tradition, the Voyage of St. Brendan. Look it up if it catches you. But like where I lean into St. Brendan is, well, again, with the recreation of this pilgrimage, it's like here, seeing this thing that most people tell me I'm mad for even putting this amount of energy into, not to mention walking 500 or 600 kilometers with 23 people who are all mad. We're all mad. I love it. It's just so beautiful. But it's like sometimes that vision falters a little bit. Sometimes the world wants to grab me and pull. And so that's where it's like leaning into trust, leaning into faith, leaning into the faith, leaning into the vision, and saying yes again, even when I can't see, even when the fog is wrapped around me, and even when I've gotten in the boat with all the friends and we're sailing and I can't really see where the Isle of the Blessed is anymore, but I know it's that way. And we get there. So I think the other thing with St. Brendan is the magnetization of allies, calling in friends, like we all here tonight in this fellowship of memory. St. Brona. St. Brona she is from Ulster. The way on the pilgrimage coming down from Downpatrick, we go right through her cell, and she was a potent being as well. One of the most beautiful mysteries that she is known for is she had this amazing bell that could ring across the mountains and across the lake, and so or across the sea, and so she could help sailors in the storms find their way into sanctuary. Now imagine how that translates in metaphor, finding our way in storms to find sanctuary. Sometimes I like to imagine her like my grandmother, my mom's mom, and just like that sweet old little Irish hug and the sweetness that comes with that, and like all the beauty and the love that pours out, taking care of people, taking care of people. So I think also the other thing that's important with her, she is one of the saints. I got motherhood on here. She was the mother of multiple other saints as well in Ireland as well as Scotland. And also, though you can't tell it from this artistic rendition, she was supposedly very beautiful. All right, so closing up with our last Columcille or Saint Columba. He is another one of these that's sort of like when Lissa and I were talking about earlier that just went through all kinds of just, he got beat up. He went to war. He would got into his warp spasm. He was going to be the king of Ulster, and he destroyed 3,000 of his enemies in one battle and went totally crazy. He went mad. And so he was actually kicked out of Ireland. He was put in a boat with a few of his friends because, of course, he came from a resource family, and they were just set out in the sea. And where did they land? Iona. So Columcille was the first being to convert from the ancient traditions into the Christian traditions, and then to land on Iona, which was, of course, prior to Christianity, was this gorgeous Druidic college, school of poetry, school of law, school of the arts, school of navigation. And he landed, and the Holy Spirit, the dove, had moved through him so strongly, it like bathed him from the inside out. Kind of like, again, what Maggie was talking about. It's like that place where you're being torn between the angels and the demons, calling in whatever beings, calling in Holy Mary, calling in Saint Ita, calling in Columcille, calling in Cuchulainn, who, like all of these beings to come, 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 and let's push out the dark. Let's create some space to heal and return, and the illumination that could come with that, the humility, the humbling that comes with that renewal is just absolutely gorgeous. And so Brendan was, of course, a visionary, but I think one of the things that is really important with Brendan and with Columcille, why I lean into this particular being is because while he too had a vision, it was a vision that came after pain. It was the vision that came after divorce. It was a vision that came after the loss of a child. Of course, these are my stories, but it's like there's loss that then opens something to repattern, to get outside of the normal constructs of society and to allow something more free, more ecstatic to move through illumination of the divine. And so he carried that. He carried that conviction. It's like the split or the hole that the shamans in Siberia would drill into their heads to allow the northern lights to swim down through their bodies. He was a carrier of this magnetism. And so Columcille is someone that I look to when it's time to do something that is, again, larger than life. But now it's not just about maintaining vision, it's about attracting in the right allies and resources to share the way with, like Lissa or Maggie or Bob or Gina or all these amazing beings who are on here this evening who have shared the way together and found an opportunity to push back that dark. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and stop oh, there's that Owen stone, Maggie. And just thank you all for coming this evening. It's 9. If you got to go, great. We can also entertain a few questions, if we will. Most of the things that we had on our paper, we've kind of interwoven already in Lissa and Maggie. Maybe what we could do is see does anyone have any questions or any inspiration that you feel like you want to put into the container before we close up this evening? It was lovely to see so many pilgrims from the last couple of years here too, and pilgrims for next year. Well, so maybe we'll pause there. And so, Maggie, I'm going to turn it over to you to just like any sort of short closing remarks that you would want to leave everyone with.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of clarify from my little overshare of the last heaven hell vision that I'd heard you say a few times about pushing the darkness out. And for me, it was a very opposite. And maybe that was the more maternal Mother Mary thing. It was actually embracing it completely and also naming it simultaneously. And I noticed that when I'm in conflict with other people, is the only way I move through is when I'm able to name things truthfully, but also in complete embrace of love and compassion. And so just clarifying that. And then I think I just want to continue by sharing that my personal journey with these energies, whether they're the plants or the animals or the saints or these divine beings, these mystics, I'm so excited to know about so much more hearing you and Lissa story tell. And just, I think, a general invitation to anyone watching this recording or here now is that to notice the synchronicities and the connection and the like the omens and the dreams and everything that comes through that feels like intimacy with these supposedly beings of the past, and and to really try to walk that middle path of not going, oh no, I'm delusional, I'm crazy, it's not real, these people are dead or they're fictional or whatever, or going, oh, I'm a special saint and da da da, and just being in that middle path of like life is magical. Like magic is actually normal. And like, let's normalize the intimacy with these divine beings and with these ancient peoples, some of us that might actually have bloodline ancestry too. Like we don't know, certain saints that are so old, there's no records. That if we're Irish, if we're in that diaspora, they might be literal ancestors. And even if they're not literal ancestors, they are living realities that we can access and have intimacy and connection with, and that can enrich our lives and give us those dream journeys and those visions and those medicine and messages that we need. And also the reminders, like you're saying, Jeremy, of like the times that we falter of like, okay, I got this vision, and then it's like, well, shit, like who am I to do that, or who, or I need help or whatever it is. Like just to continue, sometimes it's like having access to pray to these beings and to ask for their intercession, not as these, higher or pedestalized saints or people that we don't have actual true intimacy with, and that it's actually really, really normal for us to connect with all these beings. And that does include the plant saints and the animal saints. And yeah, it's just so rich and magical just simply to be alive as a human that sleeps and dreams and eats and all of it. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to say. And I love you guys. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Lissa.
Oh, what do I add to that? I mean, I'm just the thing that I'm really sitting with here is that any interruption to business as usual can be a doorway to the divine.
Mm,
Even if it feels dark, even if it feels painful, even if
mm-hmm.
it feels like, having your sleep interrupted every 2 hours for a call to prayer, um, that can be a doorway for something unusual, for something new to filter through. And I think when times feel dark or disorienting or new or confusing, remembering that we have all of these icons and archetypes of ways of alchemizing that disruption into a relationship with the divine is really hopeful and really helpful as well. I'm thinking too about John Moriarty's discussion of the bird rain, the Anfla, which is this idea that if we step back a little bit from our human anthropocentric understanding of our place in the world, we actually get to braid together with, as Maggie was saying, all the animal saints and plant saints and understand that we belong and we're not alone in this. And I think there's a way that this kind of asceticism can allow us to step back from ourselves a little bit, our stories about ourselves, and connect with something larger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think I would just kind of tuck that in with it's a little bit similar tangent to what Maggie was sharing there, but it's like our dreams, what we track, what we see in the patterns of the landscape around us through conversations are giving us an invitation to be in conversation, in communication with the divine in so many different expressions. And so I'm grateful that we've been able to get to share this time this evening. And hopefully you found a couple little crumbs or clues along your own pathway that you're tracking in life. and may it bring you closer to a revelation, to a koan, to a riddle that will help you plasticize the mind and the heart even more, to be open to receive and walk on in a really good way. So thank you all for sticking over time this evening. I'm going to close us out, but there's so many people here that walk the pilgrimage. If anybody wants to stick around and just catch up, I think that would be lovely. So, but Lissa, I know it's like 3 in the morning for you. So I will bid you gute Nacht. Hast du ein gut geschläft?
Vielen Dank.
Well, good night, everyone. And yeah,